Black Christmas was directed by Sophia Takal and co-written by her and April Wolf. This film came out last December, and I did actually get a chance to see it in theaters, but I waited a while to review, and I'll tell you why after I talk about the plot. This is now the second remake of the original 1974 film. The other came out in 2006. And this is a reimagining of that original film about a group of sorority sisters who on Christmas break discover an underground college conspiracy. So I had a chance to see this film back when it was in theaters around Christmas time, but I didn't review it until now because I noticed that when it first came out, there was quite a bit of, shall we say, anger surrounding the movie. A lot of reviews seemed really skewed. A lot of people were just giving really vague reviews that didn't seem authentic, like they were just upset because the movie is a very feminist film. And I just didn't want to pile on to that. I thought, I'll just kind of back off and review this when some of that cools down and try to approach the film from a constructive perspective rather than being one of those people that piles on. Having said all that, I hated this movie. I think it's a horrifically bad horror film, and I think it's a really terrible remake. This movie had a very rushed production. It was announced in June 2019 that a Black Christmas remake would be made by Blumhouse, and that Sophia Takal, one of the directors of an episode of the Hulu show Into the Dark, would be helming the film. That was June. The finished movie came out in December. We're talking pre-production, production, and post. That's unheard of, especially for a big movie from a big studio. And when you watch the film, you can definitely tell how rushed it was. Shots don't feel very planned. They feel sort of in the moment, happening like right in front of you without a lot of dictation about where things should go. It seems like even the camera work is mostly just handheld the whole time, and there's not a lot of ingenuity to the way the movie looks. The cinematography and the lighting is acceptable, but the entire finished product feels like it was just rushed out into theaters as quick as possible. Now, since this movie's been out for a while, I'm actually going to get into spoilers because I have so many things I want to talk about. And these are things I don't usually like to talk about on my channel. I just don't enjoy it. There's so much hatred and anger out there for some of these topics, and I don't like being part of that. But this is what this movie is about. And me discussing it, it's unavoidable. I've now seen this film twice, once in theaters and then again on digital with a friend of mine because I wanted to have a refresher. So I've paid for the movie twice, I've seen it twice, I took a bunch of notes. Before I get into the movie's messages and its themes, I'd like to simply talk about it as a horror film first. There are certain things that you expect to see in a horror movie. Especially one of this type that's a slasher technically, or at least it is a reimagining of a slasher. You expect to see some kills, there should be some thrills, some tension, some suspense, and you should feel worried about these characters. There should be white-knuckle moments where you think they're going to die or where you feel as if they're in danger. You should care about your characters, at least somewhat. As a horror fan and a film lover, I don't need all of my films to be the same. I don't expect a final girl. I don't expect every horror film to be rated R. In fact, I have adamantly talked about how that is not necessary to create a scary film in the past. There are plenty of PG-13 movies like Insidious or the American remake of The Ring or Signs that have scared me. That's unnecessary in my opinion. But in a film that's remaking Black Christmas, especially on the heels of the 2006 version, which is fucking brutal, by the way, and extremely gory, to have this film be PG-13, I thought was a mistake. Just about every scare sequence feels truncated by that rating. You can tell they're editing around sequences that might include blood to maintain that rating. There are scenes with missing information where they have cut a specific moment for the rating, and you're not exactly sure what has happened to a character. For all of these reasons, this movie feels very safe. It feels very crowd-friendly, like they're trying to appeal to the widest, broadest audience possible to be able to get as many young people in the theater as they can. But it creates a disservice to their film because you don't need blood for a movie to be scary. But you do need to understand what's happening to these characters. You need to have some kind of notion of the danger or the threat. And when you can't see anything that's happening or that has happened to a victim, it takes all that away. Pushing the violence aside, the film's jump scares and scare tactics are so overused, we've seen them 1,000 times. I'd be very surprised if anybody was surprised or startled by that. You can see it coming a mile away. And most of the scares in this movie are like that. The hand on someone's shoulder that you can't see has been parodied so many times at this point. There are moments throughout the 2019 Black Christmas that I begin to think it's a satire. I don't know how else to describe the complete incompetence on display when it comes to horror. I don't know how else to describe this amount of money being put into a project that has nothing new to offer the horror genre. And in what is perhaps the most blatant ripoff I've ever seen of a scare in a film, there's an entire sequence that I guess they were trying to pay homage to Exorcist 3, which, by the way, I love and is extremely underrated. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. I'd love to review it one day. There's a scene in this movie where a character is going in and out of some rooms looking for something, and it plays out like this.
Where are you? Are you hurt, Angel? Oh, there you are.
If you've ever seen The Exorcist 3, you probably remember what has since become the most iconic scare scene in that film. There's a difference between homage and ripoff. You can have something that reminds you of something you love, that makes you smile, that makes you excited about something that maybe you feel nostalgic for, or you understand the filmmaker is in some way excited or nostalgic or wants to tribute something. In this case, though, it's just the scene redone in this film. Poorly. What I'd also like to talk about in this movie is the use of exposition and how it's delivered to characters to tell a story.
Seriously, he was into the dark arts and shit. I read he, killed disobedient women and ritual sacrifices to male pagan gods.
Entire scenes are dictated not for character, but for exposition. For instance, after the first big attack happens on our lead characters, they run into a car and they drive away. The only thing they talk about throughout the entirety of this scene is their theories. They both suddenly start speculating about what could be happening, and naturally, they're very accurate.
Who the hell were those guys?
Something crazy is going on.
Yeah, no shit. A bunch of dudes just try to kill us.
No, I saw that guy before, the night of the talent show. The Deeks were doing some sort of ritual with the pledges.
It's a frat. Pledges pledge frats.
No, this felt different. It was like they were doing something with this black stuff that was coming out of the founder's bust.
Tell me some more.
It was like black magic or sorcery or something.
So you're telling me you think the DKO boys possessed their pledges in some supernatural hazing ritual?
You saw the pledge's face. You saw his blood. I don't know what he was, but he was changed. He wasn't human.
Tell me how!
Think about it. The bust gets brought into the founder's fraternity. Brian Huntley turns up to meet with the new pledges. And then we all start getting these messages from a Calvin Hawthorne account. Lindsay goes missing. Helena goes missing. Marty and Jesse are dead.
Thanks for the tip.
All of this leads back to DKO. I need you to help me. I need you to create a distraction so that I can sneak into the room where they were holding the ceremony and get to the bust. Because that is where the power is coming from.
I'm very confused.
What? A magical bust? No, we're going to the cops.
What are we gonna tell them? I would like to remind you that we just killed 3 people who, possessed or not, are lying dead in our house right now.
So you're telling me that this is what's happening. Yes, that's exactly actually what I'm saying. Did you hear me when I said that this is what's happening? Just in case you missed it, stupid audience members, this is what's happening right now. This is the type of writing that I think is maybe the most offensive to me. I don't like going to a movie and feeling like the writer-director doesn't think I'm going to understand or thinks that I have to be spoon-fed. I really wish that more writers would respect audience members and trust that they will understand things as they play out. That just because you're making a film for a wide audience, for a lot of people to come see, it doesn't mean everyone who's going to see it's a fucking moron. Now that I got the way the dialogue is delivered aside and the failure of a horror film that I believe it to be, I'd like to talk about the film's messages, the themes, what they're trying to communicate to the audience. This is obviously a film that is fiercely feminist in every way. So the lead character in the film is played by Imogen Poots, and we learn quickly that she was sexually assaulted in the past by another student on campus. And the implication in the film is that she was drugged beforehand. And this asshole just, jokes about it, thinks it's okay, thinks it's normal. She's had to deal with this and it's traumatized her. She'll see this guy around campus. He makes disgusting looks towards her. It's very bothersome. It makes you angry. It sort of makes you side with her early on. She's pretty much the only character in the film that you can feel some sympathy for because you understand where she's coming from and you side with her because that's fucked up. But everyone else in the movie is basically an asshole. People just walk around and treat everybody like shit. The women talk about the men poorly. The men talk about the women poorly. There's like two nice people in the movie. You have the one male character in the entire film that isn't a complete douchebag. There's another male character that's dating one of the leads, and he's okay for a while until he gets so frustrated with a conversation the women are having about men.
You never stop, do you? You just
I don't
push,
stop
and you push.
because they don't stop.
Well, not everybody wants to be like you. Some of us are quite happy to just disappear.
What did you girls expect?
Excuse me?
I told you something like this was gonna happen. Okay, you humiliated those guys up there. Of course they're pissed.
And that gives them an excuse to harass us?
What if a bunch of frat bros had gotten up and sang a song about how, I don't know, women were just bimbos who like to show off their tits, then yeah, you'd be livid.
It's a little different, Smidge.
How? Why are you allowed to say all this shit about men and we're supposed to just sit here and take it?
Because men have all the power.
Not all men have power.
Did you just not all men me? Did you just...
Not all men are rapists, Chris, okay? I'm not. But
Nobody-
you just lumped me in with the bad ones because I'm a man.
Nobody is calling you a
You
rapist.
apply it with your man-hating.
Man-hating? What did I say that was so
Fine,
offensive?
just calm down. We're trying to have a reference.
Calm down?
Yeah.
You want me to calm down? Let's calm down.
Calm down. Okay. You just trying
Shut
to...
up.
What would you do if I grabbed you
out.
like this?
Get out! You need to leave.
The second I have...
Leave! I don't give a shit!
The second I have a good friend, you tell me
Who
that...
are you? Get out of here!
You serious?
I showed you that scene for a reason. It's to hammer down a point. This movie, for the most part, plays out like a long, drawn-out Twitter feud. Everyone in this movie says social media buzzwords constantly. It feels as if it's written like people are talking on social media. There is such a disconnect now between people who almost exist on social media and people who are existing in the real world while sometimes also posting on Facebook or Twitter. That people begin to think that this is actually how people talk and interact in real life because you're so sucked into this social media world that now we have a film where every character talks as if they have a character limit to everything they say. Now that's understandable when you have like your basic Hollywood slasher. The characters in Halloween, for instance, they're nothing to write home about. Laurie Strode is awesome because Halloween's awesome and Jamie Lee Curtis is awesome. But as a character, there's not much there. But when you have a film that is going for so much more, that is trying to say so much more, that is trying to be important for a lot of people, specifically women and young girls, to have characters this dry and this bland is a giant mistake. Now, the film opens with a murder sequence. It takes quite a long time before we understand how this connects to the main story. Jaws, for instance, opens with a murder. We understand that more than likely the shark has taken this girl, but quickly. We are investigating this murder with Chief Brody. We are looking into this murder. We're wondering what happened. This film seems to have some sort of disconnect with its opening scene that doesn't really seem to add anything to the story except to suggest that there's some fucked up shit happening on campus. But barely anyone's even talking about it or mentioning it. It doesn't even feel like a murder, or at least someone missing, has occurred. And when the film came out, I saw plenty of people who were reviewing the film saying, be quiet, this isn't for you. This is not for men. I don't care what men have to say about this film. This is a film for women. I don't understand the notion of completely alienating an entire gender from a movie. I think that if you want to have a message heard, and if in your film the villains, the people who are making it hard for that message to be heard, are all men, wouldn't you want men to relate, to understand, to feel empathy, to feel some kind of connection where they could leave the theater and go, I completely understand? Another reason I have a hard time relating to these characters is that for the majority of the film, they do nothing but pity themselves. It doesn't matter who the characters are in a movie. If it's a children's animation and it's like at a zoo or something, if the lead characters do nothing but talk about how their life sucks for the entire film, it's going to get annoying. It's very difficult to want to continue to root for people like that because you would like to see them attempt to get out of these situations. And finally, within the last 5 minutes, they do. So let's talk about what's really going on at this college. Who's responsible for all of these murders, the strange text messages that Riley, the lead character, is receiving. Early on in the film, we meet Cary Elwes. He's playing a professor who is teaching some things that students are feeling uncomfortable about. There's a petition going around to get him fired from his job. As it turns out, he is also the leader of this long-standing cult of men at this college who use black magic to give themselves supernatural powers. And their entire goal is to basically take back the throne and eventually go into the courts and display dominance over women. And we learn all of this because the bad guy decides to give an epic speech in which he explains his evil plan to the lead character while she's tied up. Does he do this with all of his victims? Or just our lead character so that we can understand what's happening?
You see, when your friend, Miss Waterson, had the founder's statue removed and brought here, the boys discovered something magical hidden inside.
Towards the end of his life, Hawthorne foresaw the threat posed by women.
What?
So he took precautions in case they strayed too far out of line. A master of the dark arts, he left instructions on how to create an army of young men to take our power back.
How?
You're all insane.
No, not insane, Miss Stone. Simply men.
What?
Tired of seeing ourselves falsely accused, our livelihoods threatened, marginalized and belittled, reduced to spectators in our own lives.
What?
Upon graduation, our army will venture into courtrooms, boardrooms, and the halls of Congress to set the world right.
I can't believe in this movie the bad guy actually explains his evil plan. This is like some 1980s Mystery Science Theater 3000 shit. This is satire. It's gotta fucking be. If it's not, this is truly fucking embarrassing. But after loathing their existence for the entire film, the characters finally stand up for themselves, and an Avengers slow motion action sequence breaks out where they're all fighting with bow and arrows, and Riley takes the bust of the professor that founded this college, destroys it, and I guess that ends the black magic. They all run out of the building and everyone in it burns alive, and the film just instantly ends. Now what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that they're just going to walk off into the sunset with this college burning to the ground with tons of bodies inside of it? I feel like it would have been easier if they had just gone to the police before and said, look, some real shit's going on. You can't ignore this. But now they have to not only explain that, but also the burnt down college with all of the dead bodies. So let's backtrack a minute and look at exactly what this ending is telling us. It's already been made abundantly clear that these guys in this cult have been possessed by some kind of black magic, black liquid that's coming out of the founder's bust. Earlier in the film, Riley witnessed one student trying to join the fraternity have to go through a hazing ritual that ended up being that student being possessed by said black magic. Meaning that this guy has no idea what's going on, thinks he's just joining a fraternity, and is also being preyed upon by the higher-ups at DKO. Now, it's obvious that Carrie Elwes' character and some of the men in this cult are no good, and I wouldn't cry a tear if they all burned alive at the end of a fictional movie. But that's not what happens here. After the black magic curse is lifted, and they all are fully conscious of their surroundings and know exactly what's happening and are no longer possessed by this evil, they all burn alive. And the writers have also showed us that humanity is restored to the people when the curse is lifted, because the one nice male character in the film that has a crush on Riley, and Riley has a crush on him, is saved. And he's there with the girls as they watch the college and all of the men inside of it burn down. I'd be curious to know how many of these students that are currently burning alive at the end of this movie even knew what they were doing. How many of them had free will or control over their actions or their mind? So the message here is really clear to me. Just burn it all down. I don't see how this is an ending for any of these characters. I think this movie fails completely as a horror film. I was never scared once. I never felt anything for the characters. The action was incomprehensible. You could hardly tell exactly what was happening. It was so edited down. You barely got a sense of what was really going on in those scenes, in fact. And the scares were like non-existent. Some of the cheapest, most overused scares you've seen in horror. But as a film with a message, you can't miss it. It's as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face. It really wants you to hear everything they have to say. It's like a social media post that's being sponsored and bumped up so everyone on Twitter or Facebook can see it. I don't understand what happened with this movie. I think as a remake, it's possibly offensive. Like, it's basically just taking the name of a cult classic horror movie and slapping it onto a different story entirely. It'd be like remaking Halloween, but just having it be like some guy. I'm gonna give Black Christmas an F. There's no easy way for me to sit here and review this movie constructively, because I know that there are so many defenses that can be thrown at me for this review. It's not made for me. I'm a man, so it doesn't count. Again, not made for me. I didn't understand it. I must be sexist or misogynist or a lot of other things that just aren't fucking true. But I feel like that is some kind of shield that is put up around entertainment like this. That's not fair. Everything that's made in the entertainment world is open to constructive criticism. It doesn't matter who made it. It's an art piece, and it's open to that. And I feel like I was way nicer and way more fair than a lot of the reviews I've read. So I wouldn't really recommend seeing this movie, especially if you're a fan of the first film. I would recommend that first film, and you know what? The 2006 version gets a lot of hate. I don't really understand why. It is kind of unnecessarily mean-spirited, but it's a really well-made horror film. It's surprisingly not that bad. I would recommend checking that out sometime. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to more reviews very soon. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.